Daily Tech News Show is made possible by you, the listeners. Thanks to all of you, including Tim Deputy, Brandon Brooks, Hector Bones, and our brand new patron. Everybody welcome Aloha 808. Woo! On this episode of DTNS, NVIDIA beats the streets, so why are people so worried? Can Google solve its AI model struggles? Because they've been going on for a while. And how intelligent is Apple really going to be? This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, August 29th, 2024. From Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
From hot and humid Columbus, Ohio, I'm Robb Dunewood.
I am the show's producer, Roger Chang.
And whoever's listening to this right now, you're joining us as well, and we thank you for doing so. All right, we're all hot and humid. Let's get into the quick hits. No relation. Meta's social network Threads is making replies in the Fediverse more visible. A lot of people have been wanting this for a while. Some limitations. You can't reply directly to post from Mastodon or other ActivityPub enabled services within Threads. But if you've opted into this view, you can now see a new Fediverse replies section that appears underneath posts that have replies from Mastodon servers and other federated accounts. It's a beta feature for now, and Thread notes that some replies may still not be visible.
Automatic, the company behind WordPress, also became the owner of Tumblr 5 years ago. Now Tumblr is shifting its back end over to WordPress, which doesn't change the Tumblr's front end platform. It'll just now run on WordPress. Automatic says it makes it easier to build tools and features that work on both services, and Tumblr can now also take advantage of the open source developments on WordPress.org.
Yelp has filed an antitrust lawsuit against longtime search result rival Google. This is less than a month after a federal judge ruled that Google was operating as a monopoly, so probably not too coincidental timing. Yelp alleges that Google has created or preserved its monopoly in local search by prioritizing its own services, and also wants the court to not only order Google to stop, but pay for damages to Yelp's business as a result.
Google claims that it has evidence that APT29, a group of Russia-linked hackers, is using exploits that are, quote, identical or strikingly similar to those previously made by spyware makers in Telexa and NSO Group. Google said in a blog post released today that it is not sure how the Russian government acquired the exploits, but said that this is an example of how exploits developed by spyware makers can end up in the hands of dangerous threat actors. According to the blog post, the exploit targets iPhone and iPads, and it was designed to steal user account cookies stored in Safari, specifically across a range of online email providers that host personal and work accounts of members of the Mongolian government.
All right, all week we've been talking about the Telegram saga, which continues to unveil. Telegram CEO Pavel Durov was formally arrested in France on charges related to the distribution of pornographic images involving minors. Now, Telegram is accused of not responding to requests from French authorities to help identify a person involved in that specific case. Durov faces charges of complicity in distributing the images, money laundering, and also failing to file proper paperwork for Telegram's encryption. So basically, running the platform that helped somebody do the things that they are accused of doing. After 96 hours in custody, Durov was indicted and ordered to post €5 million bail, which he did. He was since released, but he can't leave France and has to report to the police twice a week while the investigation is ongoing. This doesn't mean he's been found guilty. It doesn't even guarantee a trial. Authorities want Durov's cooperation in identifying the distributor of these images in question. He could also avoid a trial if he cooperates fully. So, not the end of the story just yet. Not really even the beginning. On Wednesday, NVIDIA reported some, on the surface, fabulous earnings per share of 86 cents adjusted versus 64 cents expected. Always good when it's above the street, right? Revenue also up to $30.04 billion versus $28.7 billion expected. Also up. NVIDIA also said it expects about $32.5 billion in revenue for the quarter that we're in now versus $31.7 billion expected by analysts. Also up. In fact, it would be up 80% from a year earlier, if you're looking at it on a year basis. Also, on an annual basis, revenue is up 122% during this quarter, following 3 straight periods of year-over-year growth above 200%. Looking at numbers, NVIDIA cannot lose. We're on the up and up. It was even briefly the most valuable public company in the world. You might remember we talked about this on the show, although it has since dropped back to second place after Apple. So still in really good shape. NVIDIA's data center business, that includes the very sought after AI processor business, climbed 154% from a year earlier to 26.3 billion. That is 88% of NVIDIA's total sales. This is where NVIDIA is making all of its money. However, still making money from non-AI products as well. Networking products brought in $3.7 billion in revenue in its latest quarter. Okay, I know that's a lot of numbers. You might say to yourself, how could anybody be upset or worried about this? This is great, right? NVIDIA should just be a stock that you buy. Well, Rob, it sounds like the Blackwell chip, which has seen some issues behind the scenes, has gotten been in some delays before, kind of has everybody worried. Like, if the getting's good so much now, can it be sustainable?
It's interesting how analysts look at things and how companies report their numbers and report what they think they're going to do the next quarter. By all metrics, NVIDIA has had a 5-year run, unlike many other companies in the history of companies in existence have ever seen. And they aren't projecting that they're going to do poorly. They're just projecting that we're not going to have these historic all-time numbers to where we're doing 200% of our number. Oh, that's horrible news. We have to lower guidance on your chip. Now, there are some reasons why they should be doing this. Their biggest customers are making fairly clear that we don't want to be beholden to Intel forever. We might try to do some of this stuff on our own hardware. So that could be a determining factor. But it is always interesting when you see a company doing as well as it is doing, that it can go from one quarter to the next quarter and see guidance just completely turn.
And I do think that some of that is the particular type of investors that are looking at NVIDIA, because what they want to see ideally is double-digit growth, because that's what gets the clients happy. And as Rob was alluding to, as the Microsofts of the Googles, the Amazons are less willing to be beholden to a third-party player for their AI processing needs. They are investing money themselves into bespoke solutions for their particular setups. So, down the road, if you're an investor, you're looking like it's great right now, but if I'm looking at 2, 5, 10 years down the road, this market is suddenly going to get very crowded with a lot of competitors, and NVIDIA is going to have a much harder time making the gains that it has been. One's because there's more competitors. Two, you might be saturating the market with so many of these potential AI processors that will bring the prices down, which is great for people who want to buy the equipment, but not so great if you were banking on endless money coming out of NVIDIA's quarterly earnings.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I mean, by the numbers, NVIDIA is just printing money based on the fact that the GPUs, other companies are making GPUs that people want to buy, but NVIDIA has the best GPUs and has the most of them. The whole AI chip, Blackwell, being still in testing, NVIDIA has said, in fact, CEO Jensen Huang said on the company's latest earnings call on Wednesday, the change to the mask is complete. There were no functional changes necessary. Basically saying, don't worry about it. Yes, a little bit behind, but there's nothing wrong with these chips. NVIDIA also reminds people that they've got the Hopper chip, which it expects to sell a lot of, in part because the Blackwell demand is exceeding supply.
And it's interesting to note, like, one of the tacks that NVIDIA is taking, because they know this from their experience producing GPUs for PCs, is that when it first started out, NVIDIA was heavily invested in the PC gaming market, but they knew that cash cow wasn't going to exist forever, and so they branched out. They branched out into GPU or general purpose computing on the GPU to support products like Adobe Creative Cloud, whether it's Photoshop, Premiere Pro, because they needed to widen the basket and how they were making money. And NVIDIA is looking at ways to providing services, right? Whether it's GeForce now, for streamed video gaming, or offering AI processing services for smaller outfits that can't really afford to do everything in house. They can just lease out time on NVIDIA's equipment. And what it's showing me is this whole market is slowly getting more competitive, and you really can't bet on NVIDIA being the number one player, 5 years, or not even maybe in 3 years down the line, as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and a bunch of other players are spending money to develop their own chips.
Yeah, it's a great example of like being at the top is a little scary because everyone else just wants to take a piece of the pie that you've just been able to get for this amount of time.
Yeah, and NVIDIA is going to have to be innovative and come up with some new stuff to keep that excitement going. Oh, we can dominate this market this way with this new thing. And I don't think that they've really announced that yet. And that's probably why you're seeing the trends kind of change for the coming quarters. Just to change gears a little bit, Google is again allowing some users of its artificial intelligence models to generate images of people. The change comes 6 months after Google disabled the functionality after the company came under fire for its image generation tools, which depicted historically inaccurate scenes, including incorrect racial depictions, when prompted to create images of people. Dave Citron, a senior director of product management at Google, wrote in a blog post that the company had made significant progress in generating depictions of people through Imagine, an AI model that underpins some of its products. Now, Google has had issues with artificial intelligence when it comes to pictures of people going back nearly a decade. You may remember when Google had to pull the functionality from Google Photos because it was classifying black people as gorillas. Sarah, do you think that Google will get it right this time when it comes to allowing users to create images with Imagine 3? They've been struggling.
Oh, man.
Are they going to get it right this time?
Sure hope so. Sure hope so, Rob. Also, I've been calling it Imagen 3 this whole time, but Imagine makes a lot more sense. But yes, Google trying to use AI to imagine what we might want to come up with, telling a model to, yes, give me a accurate representation of this historical figure, for example. Race is part of that. If the model gets it wrong, might be a fluke. If the model gets it wrong too much, and you're a company like Google, where you say you've just got too many people working behind the scenes to, let this kind of stuff, like it's sloppy at best and much worse. Depending on who you ask. So yeah, I mean, Google has to try to make this better. The company, I would hope, is going to say, yeah, those were the early days. It was just a bunch of beta models. Now we're fine. But when you're a company of Google's size, and this doesn't just relate to AI, but it definitely does these days, if you make mistakes like that, it's going to reflect very poorly on the company, and that goes way beyond, we were sloppy, we didn't try hard enough.
What's interesting is Google's approach up through now just feels very ad hoc, right? It's like we have a fire, put it out. We got a fire, put it out. But it never feels cohesive, like there's a singular vision game plan. And Justin has focused on this before. And I think
Justin Robert Young, no, he definitely thinks that management is largely in part to blame for this.
To me, this is just very indicative of a company that is just kind of all over the map, right? We're all trying to do. The fact that they can't even house anything of their AI stuff in something that a consumer can understand, right? It's like. It's Imagine, it's AI, it's Google. So is it Gemini? Is it Gemini? There's all these things, and it's like literally just throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And I'm wondering if this is just kind of more of the same of that kind of behavior, where it's not not a kind of focused, unified, approach, strategy, mindset. Like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is the fourth quarter. We're one touchdown and a field goal behind. Let's focus on what we need to incrementally get up, so we're at least on par, because they're not even on par with what OpenAI has produced, and it's it must be very worrying for the company.
It has to be.
Google also, historically, and you kind of have to be a technical person, I guess, to have this conversation. But historically, Google is, engineer focused, great at launching things, not great at marketing those things, is very well known for doing things wrong and then saying, you know what, let's just shut down the service. It's not great for us. I mean, that is a punchline for Google at this point. Google does a lot of things really well. It's not like the company's a failure, of course not. But it does sometimes feel like under the hood you say, what is going on here? What is happening to the point where these things get missed?
Having great engineers. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Google is no longer a company that can get away with that. We're talking about a company that makes more profit each year than many, many, many countries do in GDP. And they're the biggest company doing this stuff. So when you continually have these missteps, people are going to say, what's going on? These are the kind of mistakes that you simply just can't make. You cannot have this happening where you have a system that generates pictures and you tell it to generate George Washington, and George Washington looks like me. Everybody knows that George Washington was a white man. Why doesn't Google know that? Why weren't they able to foresee these things happening? So is testing, are they not doing adequate beta testing? I don't know what the issue is, but these cannot be problems for a company with the resources, the number of developers, and the size and the breadth of a company this big. Just can't make these kind of mistakes.
Well, and also the race to be number one in AI, I think plays into this a lot as well. It's like OpenAI didn't come out of nowhere. A lot of people knew what OpenAI was, and certainly the people responded and responsive for the founding since many years ago. Y Combinator and that sort of thing. YC Combinator, YC Combinator,
yeah.
And Y Combinator, gosh, and right. But at the same time, it was like, well, what's Google going to do? What's Apple going to do? These conversations, we're going to talk about Apple in a second. These conversations had got the company spooked. Microsoft right in there with the team. And I think Google didn't make these missteps because they were, trying to race to the finish line, but I think that probably played a pretty big role. All right. Well, if you've got a thought about anything we've talked about thus far on the show or may talk about on the rest of the show, send us your feedback. We want it. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. All right. So Apple uses its Applebot to scrape sites for search indexing and training data for Apple Intelligence products. This is not something that Apple is doing, in a silo. Lots of other companies do this. In fact, we've talked about issues with Reddit saying we aren't cool with certain companies scraping our data, for example. We would like to have some sort of financial relationship with you. The search data helps Apple feed its Spotlight suggestions, but that's not the only data that is being used, just part of it. But if you're a website and you don't want to be involved, you do have an option to opt out of Apple Intelligence, that you use an Applebot extended tag that still lets you appear in search results. So something like if I search for something on my iPhone using Siri type thing, you're not going to get cut out of that. But you don't get scraped for Apple Intelligence specifically. Now, Wired examined some major sites, robots.txt files. These are the files that can allow or disallow scraping, finding that quite a few sites indeed opted out of Apple Intelligence. Facebook, Instagram, Craigslist, Tumblr, the New York Times, Wired's own parent company, Condé Nast. Data journalist Ben Nash did some separate digging around of his own and found about 25% here or there of news websites are indeed opting out of Apple's training data. Now, you might say, ooh, so, somebody's got a problem with Apple specifically. Yeah, they have a problem with Apple having so much money and not paying these companies to be in on, in on the game here. I mean, Apple Intelligence, we don't even really know what it is yet. We know that there are some features that are promised, and there's a few things in developer builds, for iOS and macOS. But Rob, I gotta say, I mean, it is a pay-to-play world.
It's definitely a pay-to-play world. Apple, according to this, is 25% of sites are blocking them. The article, and I believe the article, believes that this number is going to go up largely in part because there's just not a lot of companies that are paying attention to Apple in that way. This is something that they haven't historically done. So they're not looking at them like they look at Google or like they look at ChatGPT or OpenAI, I should say, or Perplexity or some of these other platforms where they know that this is what, that they're coming after their data. I absolutely imagine that this number is going to go up from 25%. And the thing that I think about is that Apple historically really hasn't been a company that pays other companies for access to the data to give to Apple users.
No, quite
they have been of the mind of, we're going to charge other companies to get their products in front of Apple users. And this is a little bit different. And, I wonder if this is a sea change for Apple, or if Apple will try to figure out how to work deals out with these companies to where they're just not paying that much, because there definitely still is value to being on an iPhone. There is definitely value to being on an iPad. So I just wonder, how is Apple going to ultimately navigate this new paradigm to where they, like everybody else, have to go and pay for access to all this data?
I mean, I imagine they would do what they did with Apple News when they went to all the publishers and say, like, okay, these are our rates, these are what we're going to pay. It's interesting because some of these, especially newspapers, I mean, they're in a position where ad revenue isn't cutting it like it used to, and hey, here's another way we can, at least for the time being, bring in some revenue. If they need data to train, fine. Will you just pay us X amount of dollars? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of horse trading behind the scenes on what they get and what they get in return, because I don't think it's going to be strictly monetary compensation. I also feel that Apple is in the position where it's trying to catch up to what OpenAI is doing, and Apple really doesn't want to be in the position where it has spent untold sums of developing its own silicon, develop its own, in-house team, just to have this one key piece of their business that they're going to just have a third party handle entirely. They're going to want to bring it in. And even if it means, spending more than they want to initially, the end game, of course, is to have everything in-house. We're gonna pay Intel for their chips until we can figure out how to make our own. We're gonna pay all these companies for their training data until we can either find a solution with a broader number of sources to train our data with, or training to
But
find.
what would that solution be?
Well, is to have synthetic, generated data to train it, right? That's kind of the holy grail. Now, whether or not you think that's totally a totally viable solution, I don't know, it's still up in the air. But Apple really wants to keep things in house. I mean, they're a vertically integrated company for a reason, and it's not because they want to have their entire business model dependent on a few outside players.
I mean,
when I think about
this does. I know that this is going to. It's an apples to oranges comparison. But when Apple Maps launched, Apple got trashed on because Google Maps was so much better. They weren't even. There wasn't even a comparison, and Apple Maps was quite a bit behind. Like, what have you been doing this whole time? Totally different ballgame now. I've got no problem with Apple Maps. I use it all the time. But part of me thinks that if Apple can't play the same game that a lot of other companies, OpenAI being maybe the best example of this, and you say to yourself, I don't really care what kind of AI tool I'm using. I want to ask it a question. I want it to get the right answer. If Apple doesn't make these deals that other companies are making, then the end user just says, oh, it's just a worse product.
Here's the question for me on this. When I think about Microsoft, when I think about who is a big competitor to Apple in this. When I think about Google, who is a huge competitor to Apple in this, they are software companies. Apple is a hardware company that just happens to make software for its hardware. And that's really a different paradigm than how Google, how Microsoft, how ChatGPT, how these other companies are going at it. Apple makes its money by selling iPhones, iPads, MacBooks. These other companies make money by selling their services. Apple does too, but it's not close to what these other companies are doing. So what really is going to be interesting is, as does Apple navigate through this, they have to work and play the same game that Google is playing, that OpenAI is playing, that Microsoft is playing, and they have to deal with this from a software perspective, because that's what this is. There's definitely going to be hardware on their system, but there's software and there's services on the back end to drive all this. And I don't know that Apple is there yet.
And I mean, quickly, I just wanted to say that you bring up a very good point, Rob. I mean, if you look at all these companies, Google, Microsoft, yeah, they're services, they're software companies, they're search companies, but they do hardware in some level. And at some point, we're coming to the point where all that is just one. Whether you have a hardware device or software, they all need to be integrated into a single experience, right? Google Pixel wouldn't be Google Pixel if it wasn't tied into Google Search, if it wasn't tied into Google's services. And the same way, all these companies really need are really want to have their own fiefdom, because that's the only way, as we move forward, that they think they can compete. Because until we need to have all the stuff ourselves. We need to have our own AI services. We need to have our own hardware. Whether it's Microsoft Surface, whether it's Google Pixel, Apple iPhone. You're going to see they're all at some point they're all going to meld into a similar style company, just from different directions.
Yeah. Well, there is some interesting news, potentially. The Wall Street Journal sources say that Apple is in talks to invest in OpenAI as part of a new fundraising round for OpenAI that would value OpenAI above $100 billion. You might say, well, didn't they already? Well, Apple has announced that they're going to be working with OpenAI on some next version of Apple Intelligence, but this could mean a deeper relationship between the two companies. All right, let's move on to the mailbag. Ryan replied to your column, Roger, your latest 2 cents column, about streaming service choices that people have and how that compares to the cable industry in general. Ryan said, I canceled all my streaming options except for Peacock. I get 6 months of Paramount Plus from my cellular provider, which is meant for free. Sometimes I use it. I have Amazon Prime because I didn't cancel it in time, so I have Prime Video. And the Peacock subscription is paid for by a friend in another country who just wants to watch WWE. And I can bank on that through about 2026. Ryan says, I don't miss having Netflix or Hulu or BritBox or any of those services. Considering their costs now, I will gladly pay $3 a month when I start working for a 480p stream on each platform without ads, for example. That would be a profitable option for them. I don't think I'll resubscribe when I start working.
So, well, quickly, my column was basically was a column on how most recently Discovery, Warner Brothers, was making money off its streaming platform, but it was not doing so hot on its cable TV business. And what I was pointing at was the kind of swapping of the positions, where cable TV was now kind of looking a little sick compared to streaming, because Netflix, Disney Plus, they've all seen they're all in the black as of recently. And with the advent of services like Pluto TV, you are getting a lot more diversity and options, including free options that really eat into kind of the cable TV model that people have been, so at least in the US, have been so used to for the past 40 years.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely want to thank Ryan for the email. And we also want to shout out AI Named This Show, where each week Tristan Jutra and Tasia Custodi keep you informed about the latest and potentially the greatest in the AI world. Join them at AINamedThisShow.com.
Patrons, stick around for the extended show, Good Day Internet. We're going to be talking about the show and specifically if ChatGPT actually works. You might say, yeah, of course it works, Sarah. Well, the answer continues to confuse me.
You can also catch the live show Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC. Find out more at Daily Tech News Show /live. We'll be back tomorrow with Molly Wood and Lynn Peralta talking about recycling EV batteries.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.